importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians
That's right.
as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight. His Royal Highness, the Duke of Sussex, took the witness stand today in the explosive phone hacking trial brought against Mirror Group newspapers. With a group of famous, wealthy and influential individuals taking on the media, ought we to be worried about the impact this may have on the freedom of the press? I'll discuss this and the rest of the day's dramatic developments with royal expert Michael Cole. Are we all doomed? Rishi Sunak's advisor on artificial intelligence has warned that AI systems will be powerful enough to kill many humans within 2 years, with AI having the potential to provide unprecedented progress in many sectors. Where do the upsides end and the worries begin? Should we, as human beings, be concerned about the effect of AI on our very existence? I have a panel more intelligent than any robot to examine the risks. More wastage from Whitehall. There's a surprise. The chairman of the House of Commons Public Accounts Committee, Dame Meg Hillier, has issued a damning report on the extraordinary extent of waste, much of which comes from failing projects. With Dame Meg advising the government to do better by taxpayers, unusual for socialists, but never mind, I'll be speaking to Investigations campaign manager at the Taxpayers Alliance, Elliot Keck. And two of the country's most puissant institutions are under scrutiny for potential shortcomings in complaints processes. In a report today, it was revealed that the BBC received 1.7 million complaints, out of which only 25, which concerned bias from its coverage, were upheld. And with the CBI fighting for its life after a series of humiliating scandals, why do our institutions so often fail sufficiently to deal with the public's concerns? State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by my eminent panel of barrister and former Conservative MP Jerry Hayes and the legendary broadcaster Michael Crick. As ever, I want to hear from you. It's the most important part of the programme. Email me, you know this off by heart by now, mailmog@gbnews.com. Now it's time for the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Jacob, thank you. Good evening. Well, it's been a day of drama in the High Court in London today. As you've been hearing, Prince Harry has accused the former Mirror Group newspaper's editor, Piers Morgan, of intimidation, and he said he's received a barrage of horrific attacks against him and his wife, Meghan, as a consequence of him bringing the claim to court. The Duke of Sussex gave evidence at the High Court in London against the publisher of the Daily Mirror over alleged unlawful information gathering. Harry also said, "Our country is judged globally by the state of our press and our government," accusing the press of having blood on its typing hands during his cross-examination. Mirror Group Newspapers denies all allegations. The trial continues tomorrow. Meanwhile, the United States government will be challenged in court over its decision to give the Duke of Sussex a US visa in 2020. That's after Prince Harry's admissions of illegal drug use in his memoir, Spare. It's not known if he admitted this detail for his visa application. US official policies dictate that visa applicants who are found to be drug users are ineligible for US visas. The Foreign Secretary today said damage to a major dam in Ukraine is a catastrophe and an abhorrent act. Thousands of people have had to leave their homes after the huge 2-mile-long dam in southern Ukraine was severely damaged. Ukraine is accusing Russia of blowing it up, but a member for Putin's United Russia Party is accusing Ukraine of carrying out the attack. Hundreds of homes, streets and businesses have been badly flooded. The police watchdog has announced it's launched a criminal investigation into the fatal collision involving a police motorcycle escorting the Duchess of Edinburgh. The officer from the Special Escort Group is being investigated on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving, as well as by causing death by careless driving. 81-year-old Helen Holland died after being struck by a police escort bike in West London last month. Ryanair cancelled 400 flights today amid French air traffic control strikes. Some of the impacted flights are to and from the UK and Ireland. A petition calling for the European Commission to protect flights over France during times of strikes has so far been signed by over 1.1 million people. And a Veterans Memorial Service has taken place today to mark the 79th anniversary of the D-Day landings. The Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, was in France for the service alongside the French President, Emmanuel Macron, on the anniversary of the 1944 Normandy landings. Also in attendance was Léon Gautier. He's the last surviving member of the French commandos who stormed the Normandy beaches defended by Hitler's troops. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
His Royal Highness, the Duke of Sussex, is the first royal in 132 years to give evidence in the High Court, claiming industrial-scale phone hacking and deceptive information gathering by Mirror Group newspapers between 1991 and 2011. The group contest the claims and deny senior figures' knowledge of wrongdoing. But the royal family is always ill-advised to go to court, that their position is so important, so powerful, so dignified, that the indignity of cross-examination undermines the magic that needs to surround royalty. The allowing daylight in is a fundamental error, and it seems to me that it is damaging rather than enhancing the Duke of Sussex's reputation. It's no good people who live very privileged existences complaining that if the quid pro quo for palaces, for motorcycle outriders, for pomp and circumstance is press intrusion, that doesn't seem to me to be too high a price to pay. Celebrities cannot take advantage of fame and fortune without the price. And the price is that what they do is of interest, which of course they want, because that's the whole basis of celebrity, is being of interest. But the freedom of the press is much more important than anything to do with celebrity, because it is one of our great constitutional safeguards. And it is much more important, overwhelmingly more important, to have a free press than to have a responsible press. And the Duke of Sussex's attacks upon journalists seem to swing between paranoid and hysterical. This quotation from him, "How much more blood will stain their typing fingers before someone can put a stop to this madness," is an awful thing to have said. We have journalists who are out in Ukraine covering a serious war. We have journalists, we have people like Kate Adie who have been to practically every war zone going back over decades. There are so many journalists who aren't bound up in the celebrity cycle, who are doing things that really enhance our knowledge of what is going on. And the celebrities and royals use the press when it suits them. They use them to enhance their fame, their fortune and their power, and they do not have the right to complain when it fails to be syrupically sycophantic. Obviously, if His Royal Highness were not royal, if he didn't have the title, he wouldn't be of interest to the press. But then he wouldn't have the money or the influence to attack it. Why is a free press so constitutionally important? Well, it's one of the four pillars of the Constitution, along with democracy, the rights of property and the rule of law. It is the safeguard of democracy because it allows the discussion of ideas. It allows us to say whether the policy of Party A is better than the policy of Party B. It exposes hypocrisy. It also exposes and roots out corruption. And its freedom is so much more important than its responsibility, because a responsible press is a censored press, and a censored press is a tool of dictators. So the Duke's crusade is wrong, as was Sir Keir Starmer's persecution of journalists as Director of Public Prosecutions, and it is important that it is defeated. In comparison, His Royal Highness's attack on the government is ill-advised but trivial. The uncles of Queen Victoria regularly fulminated against the then government to remarkably little effect. But protection of the free press really matters. It is the constitutional Koh-i-Noor diamond. As always, I want to know what you think. mailmog@gbnews.com. But now I have somebody as well informed as anybody in the country to discuss these matters, the renowned royal expert and commentator, Michael Cole. Michael, you used to report on these events. You obviously are well connected with the royal family. Do you think it is sensible for the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry, to be going to court to expose himself to this level of scrutiny?
Before he went into the witness box today, he said that the tabloid press, which is not just the red tops, the tabloid press, the middle market people, were the mothership of internet trolling, and it was his mission, one might even say crusade, to save the press. I think after today we have to ask ourselves, can we save Prince Harry? Because his hurt is raw, his belief is profound in what he's saying, and his anger is incandescent. But belief is not proof, and it's not evidence. And this case will turn on evidence. It's not being heard by a jury. It's being decided by a judge sitting alone. And the judge, even if he bends over backwards to be sympathetic to a man who lost his mother at the age of 12 and feels he's been hard done by, even if he bends over backwards and gives him every latitude, I think he will find it extremely difficult to find in his favour, because having read through the whole of the transcript of today's testimony, in sporting terms, the Prince has not laid a glove on Mirror Group newspapers, because he's got a very uphill struggle here. He's going to have to prove that these things happened. And proof is not belief. Proof is actual, hard, tangible evidence that can be put before the judge to prove those things that which he claims happened to him and happened to his friends really did occur. It's a major mistake for him to go into that, into court. I advised against it. I've written about it. It's a major error, and that's why it hasn't happened for 131 years.
Yes, the royals recognise that going to court is a bad idea if you're royal. You're right, though, to say that he deserves some sympathy, that obviously his mother dying when he was so young must be a very difficult burden to bear, and he has lived a very public life. But the freedom of the press is just so fundamental that politicians know that if they do things wrong, they will be exposed. Businesses know that if they are involved in monopolistic practices or corruption, they will be exposed. This is so fundamental to our constitution, and for a royal to do something that is, if it succeeded, so damaging to the constitution, seems to me to be more than a mistake.
Jacob, I was hacked. I was hacked. That was proven. I received a very nice letter of apology from a chief executive of one of the company that was hacking me, and the people responsible went to jail, and I received a modest sum of damages, which I didn't ask for, and that was just given to me. I was asked if I wanted to join the joint action against Mirror Group newspapers, and I said two things. I said, first of all, I'm too old and I don't want to spend any of my remaining time fighting a court case. But secondly, I believe profoundly and deeply and forever in the value of a free press. It's important now more than ever. We need it, and otherwise scandals would be swept under the carpet more than they are. We really desperately do need it in our system.
And there are laws to protect that the hacking that went on was unlawful. Compensation has been paid.
And it was exposed by a free press.
And it was exposed by a free press. It was actually The Guardian, wasn't it,
yes,
that exposed that hacking had been going on. But that what Prince Harry seems to be trying to do is to wage a campaign against the press to stop it doing its basic job, and is using this extraordinary language, the quotation again, how much more blood will stain their typing fingers. Now, that's just such an over-the-top comment, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes. His mother died in terrible circumstances, and there was a collective sigh of relief in Fleet Street that none of those photographers, I won't call them photographers, they're thugs with cameras, those paparazzi who were there, were working for British publications. Although the photographs were sent to British publications, but in a late show of good taste and discretion, they just put them in the safe. They didn't publish them. It is extreme language. And I think he fails to understand the importance of a free press, particularly in our constitutional monarchy, as we're very lucky to live in this country and the way it is run. And the press has always played an important part in that. You know, very ill-advised, he said that the government was rock bottom. Well, it's not for him to say that, particularly as a royal duke. He's a member of the House of Lords. He's a peer.
No, not anymore, he's not. I mean, he could be elected as an hereditary.
But he hasn't got a vote. He hasn't got a vote in this country, as far as
yes, he has. But once they chucked out the hereditaries, they got the vote back.
Oh, really?
So, yes.
So he could vote here?
He could vote.
Well, that's good. But also what he said about the press, that it was rock bottom. Well, every morning, 10 national newspapers come out in this country, from the Daily Star through to the Financial Times. And they're one of the glories of living in this country, a free, vibrant press which covers the whole spectrum of political opinion. And in America, where he lives, in Los Angeles, there's one newspaper, the Los Angeles Times, and in any large conurbation in America, there's only one newspaper. There's no competition.
And you were a royal correspondent.
I was.
You therefore know how it works, that the royals promote stories about themselves which they think show them in a good light. And they and celebrities, to my mind, can't have it both ways. That you can't just have the press report when it's positive about you and find that the press don't use the picture of you where you can't eat a bacon sandwich or whatever the equivalent is for a royal.
Well, the evidence was adduced today that some of these articles, of which he's complaining and saying that they were obtained illicitly, illegally, were actually furnished by the chief spin doctor of his father. And it's all well known and not denied that his mother rang certain members of the press. She even rang me from time to time, and she did when it suited her, and also to correct stories, because she did read the newspapers and she wanted them correct. So there are many, many ways in which these stories get into the newspaper.
And it's a long time since the press secretary at Buckingham Palace was called the abominable no man, because he always said no to every story and they kept a reserve. They want to place the right stories.
Well, strangely enough, I mentioned the abominable no man. I've written an article in a new book which is called Reporting Royalty, which has just been published, which deals with that very, very subject and how we got from the abominable no man in the 1950s to where we are now, and the mistakes that were made and the changes that were made. But, you know, the monarchy is here by consent, and it has a vast support. The figures of approval for the monarchy
are still huge. But unfortunately, as always, the late Queen got it right. But coming up, is AI, artificial intelligence, a force for good, or are we all doomed? We will be asking how the government can prepare for the threat AI poses to life as we know it. My eminent panel will give their views on the rise of this phenomenon.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is State of the Nation. And kindly, you've been getting in touch with your thoughts. Andrew, very controversial. You rightly say that the freedom of the press is vital to the liberty of a nation. Does it not follow that freedom of television and freedom of the internet are just as important? Ought we not to ditch Ofcom? No, definitely not. They're wonderful, lovely people, and if any of them watching, may they live for 10,000 years. Jan says, anyone who wants to muzzle the free press has plenty to hide. That's a very good point. Ian, it seems like Harry is spending more time in court than the characters in Bleak House. I wonder if it'll be in the court circular, incidentally, tomorrow, which usually records royal activities. And Dan, I understand the role of a free press, but how can we trust them when they outright lie or sensationalise many stories while ignoring real ones? And the one he suggests that's being ignored is the good news of Brexit. which I could spend the whole of the rest of the programme on, but we're going to talk instead about artificial intelligence, which has quickly become a godsend for students, a headache for schools and universities, and a lightning rod for political controversy. And the problem is closer to home than we may think, with Rishi Sunak's advisor on artificial intelligence warning that AI systems will be powerful enough to kill many humans within 2 years. CEO and entrepreneur Matt Clifford is helping the Prime Minister set up an AI task force and says policymakers should be prepared for a wave of new threats that could arise if mankind doesn't find a way to control the technology. Experts caution that AI could be used to launch cyber attacks, design chemical and biological weapons, and says there's a longer-term risk the technology could lead to the extinction of humanity. It's beginning to sound like the plot of a Hollywood blockbuster. But new technology is always feared. When the railways came in, they thought that going above 20 miles an hour would suffocate you. When they first split the atom, they worried that once you split one, it would never stop. So the risk is not that we're all destroyed by it, but that we don't embrace it. To reap the benefits of AI, we must recognise that the risks don't come from students using ChatGPT for homework help or someone using it to write a CV. The danger comes if China has it and we do not. But let's examine this with my eminent panel of barrister and former Conservative MP Jerry Hayes and the legendary broadcast journalist Michael Craig. So, Jerry, you've been barracking me about this because you think this is basically boring and you're not interested in AI. So I'll go to Michael. Michael.
Ooh.
Michael. Do you think we should be worried, or is this just classic? I think we should be all doomed.
I think we should be exceedingly worried, and I think there is a very strong chance that we will destroy ourselves through AI, if not through global warming, or probably a combination of the two. But let's concentrate on AI for the time being. The trouble is, you mentioned the analogy of the railways or nuclear weapons. The trouble is that you weren't creating new mines there, and effectively we are creating new mines here, and we are creating new mines that within a year or two are going to be superior to any mine on the planet, even yours, Jacob. And that is worrying, because those mines may well have the inclination to subjugate us or to destroy us. They may find us a nuisance. And the analogy with the railways and nuclear power, certainly, and nuclear weapons as well, is that we found ways to regulate them. But it took a while. And there are, with all sorts of regulations on the railways, you probably think too many. And certainly there are in terms of nuclear energy and nuclear weapons. We have got to think of ways of regulating AI pretty quickly. And the trouble is, as you say, that our enemies are going to develop it all the same.
We need to have the best AI as soon as possible, and if we start regulating it now, we will simply stop its growth.
Well, the regulation doesn't mean necessarily stopping its growth. It needs to be regulated to stop it overcoming us as the human race.
Now, Jerry, Michael's explained why it's interesting.
Yes, how do you regulate your enemies? Because the difficulty is...
You compete.
Look, if Russia wants to do it, they'll do it. If China wants to do it, they'll do it. Not in our interests, but in their best interests. You will have... what's the difference between a British soldier and an AI soldier? At the end of the day, the British soldier will say, I'm not going to kill that child. AI, destroy your enemy. Now, we've had the situation in the United States of America whereby there was a drone, and the drone was programmed to say, we will not actually, we won't stop our program. And they killed the person who sent that drone off, because he said it was wrong to do so. Now, that is...
Well, so a drone kills its own inventor. Has this actually happened, or is this...
No, it's just happened. It was in the Times, so it must be true.
Well, usually things are in the Times true, but occasionally even Homer nods.
Yeah. And the problem of how you attribute responsibility and how you hold AI minds to account... I mean...
Well, you can't.
Exactly. If an AI computer or a robot or whatever goes out and murders 3 people... Well, what does the law do about this? Does it prosecute the machine, which would be absurd, or the person that owns the machine?
Well, it would be
or perhaps the robot has disowned its owner. There are all sorts of fascinating problems and really serious problems.
They can have a completely independent life without any of us to control them. So,
like plants and animals do.
Simplistically, why don't you unplug them?
Well, you might be able to do that.
Because they won't allow them to be unplugged, like 2001.
You see, this is where I think we're getting into sci-fi
I think it's possible also.
and just becoming too paranoid about it.
No, it's
that
not.
We will have the ultimate control over anything we create.
Well, that is what we need to achieve through regulation. The regulation that you're not very keen on. I mean, I
think regulation at this stage will stifle rather than protect.
It's a beginning.
I think you know, the history of so many things, including global warming, and I know you don't really believe in global warming, has been that if you delay and delay and delay, the problem gets worse. And for instance, it was occurring to me last night, there is nothing to stop an AI computer or a robot or whatever, I'm not using the right terms, I know, from, you know, committing frauds against all of us, clever frauds on the internet, and assembling a vast fortune. And being a separate financial entity.
But how does it come on, this fortune? It can't buy fast cars or buy dinners.
You're a finance man. You understand how the stock market works. And you've seen how sometimes rogue algorithms completely distort the market. And then humans have to go in.
But the problem with algorithms is that they don't have enough data to go on. That's why in 2008 they failed. It's why the algorithm to give exam results a couple of years ago failed during the pandemic. It's because they're not sophisticated enough. And that's the advantage humans will always have, that we can fill in gaps, whereas AI will always need to be searching for some form of...
Well, AI will gradually fill in those gaps as well. There won't be many gaps left, I suspect. You know, maybe even in my life, you know, maybe in 20, 25 years, there may not be many gaps left. I mean, a lot of those gaps are being filled very, very rapidly. This is happening much more rapidly than the railways or nuclear power or nuclear weapons. That's the other worrying thing. I mean, I think the Prime Minister is right to make this a major priority. I mean, you know,
but he's not going to get any international agreement.
This is the problem.
He may get the US and the EU to agree.
I know.
He's not going to get China to agree. He's not going to get Russia to agree.
I mean, North Korea. But one of the things surely we have to do is we have to program everything to say, you know, everything you do must be in the interests of the human race, or something along those lines. But what's, you know, is there anything then to stop that? To overcome that?
But you and I disagree on what is going to be in the interests of the human race.
I know.
I think that there are different policy precepts, and therefore, why should
preserving her? Well, we wouldn't disagree, I don't think, on. For instance, preserving human life, although actually we might do that.
I'm very strongly against euthanasia, and I don't know what your views are, but I think you should preserve life to the end of life.
We might not be far apart on that, but anyway, but I agree. There are lots of people who do disagree with you and me on lot. Yeah, nobody has the same views on. But so it is tricky,
even on life.
It is very, very tricky. But I mean. We've got to come up with something to stop these people these entities getting out of hand.
I think this is a great opportunity, and that humanity will be able to control AI.
Why do you say that?
Why? Because if we've invented it, we will know how to switch it off. We will have been the people behind the program.
Don't know. You see, we invented nuclear weapons. We can't disinvent them.
We can't disinvent them, but they haven't been used in war, have they, since 1945?
Yeah, but that's because there are various
because they're so powerful.
And they're so powerful.
It is astonishing. That's
because people recognise the risks.
Well, no, but if it...
Oh, you have little faith. I think you'd have been wearing a sandwich board saying the end of the world is nigh.
I feel like doing so. But, I mean, it won't be long before, you know, an AI robot can do your job as a television presenter, and our jobs as pundits do them far better than we do, and they'll be much cheaper. Well, in your case, anyway.
We've had artificial intelligence.
Thank you to my panel. Remember, we want to hear your thoughts. Mailmog at gbnews.com. Coming up, a familiar tale of blundering from the blob, with a new report showing Whitehall has lost millions of pounds of taxpayers' money in the past 2 years. We'll be discussing this with Investigations campaign manager at the Taxpayers Alliance, Elliot Keck. But first, a preview of what's coming up on Dan Wootton's must-watch show on the Duke of Sussex in the High Court.
It's D-Day for Prince Harry as his battle with the press reaches the High Court. But will he regret becoming the first royal in 130 years to take the stand? We'll bring his bombshell testimony to life, voiced by an actor, before getting the reaction of royal experts like Tom Bower and Lady Colin Campbell, plus Paul Burrell responds exclusively to the Duke's latest jibes. Harry's evidence, the verdict on Dan Wootton tonight, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "No, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. I remain Jacob Rees-Mogg, and you've been getting in touch with your thoughts. Liz doesn't agree with me. She says the problem is, Mr. Rees-Mogg, just like the World Wide Web, we have no idea how far it will take us. Wake up, Mr. Rees-Mogg. That would make me woke if I woke. Anyway, never mind. You are living in the dark ages. We are just about to embark on another horrific, out-of-control scenario. Stephen says, I've worked in IT and taught in a local college. I believe AI has the potential for incredible good, but also incredible bad. AI could find a cure for major cancers, but equally could decide the cost of providing a cure is too great and elimination is better. John, Michael's imagination is running away with him. AI is here and we'll just have to buckle up and enjoy the ride wherever it takes us. In a damning report from the chairman of the Cross-Party Public Accounts Committee, Dame Meg Hillier has told that Whitehall must do better by the taxpayer. In the annual report, it was highlighted that fraud against the taxpayer has spiralled from £5.5 billion in 2018-20 to £21 billion in the past 2 years, warning that Whitehall does not understand risk well enough and is too often clinging to failing projects with optimism bias partly to blame for the latter. Singling out the Department of Health and Social Care, the committee noted that an extraordinary £14.9 billion in waste had been accrued in purchasing personal protective equipment and other spending relating to the COVID response. Drawing on other sectors, Hillier argued the blob must foster a culture similar to that in the technology industry, failing faster and learning from its mistakes. The report also insisted that the government must become better at dealing with uncertainty and accept there is always unpredictability, citing the military mantra that no plan survives the battle, but never go into battle without a plan. I'm joined now by Investigations Campaign Manager at the Taxpayers Alliance, Elliot Keck. Elliot, isn't this something that governments always need to get better at? And there is a conflict between the political embarrassment of admitting that your project is wrong and the economic reality that you need to do something else. And the sunk cost fallacy is at the heart of this.
Well, a lot of research has been done into this, and what it's shown is that the public sector, and particularly the political element of the public sector, has a particular problem with the sunk cost fallacy. And one of the reasons for that is when embarking on these projects that are seen as politically sensitive or politically important, some of the estimates that are used to justify it are just completely absurd, so that when they are overrun massively, or when the business case is proven to not be as effective as it once was, there seems to be just this complete inability to drop it because of this political sensitivity.
And the difficulty in judging what the cost will be. So we've got the HS2 project that seems to have gone up now at about £100 billion, which will take a few minutes off a trip to Birmingham. Yeah. But now so much money has been spent, almost nobody, probably other than me, wants to cut it. What's the view of the Taxpayers Alliance?
Well, we'd like to scrap HS2 in full, but I think we're unfortunately past that point. And, you know, there are some projects which overrun in time and cost, but which actually, once they're completed, they seem to be worth it. The Elizabeth line, which stops just near the GBNews studios, is perhaps one of them. But there are other projects which, you know, a few months in, a few years in, government should just be able to drop. And one of them is HS2. Another one might be the COVID lockdown.
Well, the COVID lockdown, we've now had a report yesterday saying that it didn't save that many lives, and it certainly had a huge economic cost. The PPE is slightly different, though, isn't it? Because the cost of PPE rose because there was a shortage. That was straightforward supply and demand, and people thought it was needed. That was a quick fire cost rather than something that went over an extended period.
Yes, and inevitably, listen, there was going to be waste associated with the beginning of the COVID pandemic. That was absolutely inevitable. But what we're continuing to see, TPA research found just recently that £580,000 a day is still being spent on PPE storage. And given the amount of fraud there was in PPE, you know, the amount of faulty equipment that was purchased, it's clear that checks and balances weren't being used to the extent that they could have done.
And fraud is really serious. I took over from Lord Agnew, who was so good about trying to get the government to think about fraud and set up the government's internal fraud department to try and stop it. Yeah. But that once money is spent, governments are much less good at seeing how it was spent than they are about arguing about what the budget will be in the first place. Is this something the TPA is regularly coming up against?
Yes, absolutely. Ministers change, civil servants change, and you then have a problem of accountability many years in the future. And I think we do need to look at mechanisms to ensure that the people that made decisions at the start have some level of accountability in the years going forward.
And if you were to be given dictatorial powers, what would you start cutting? You've got the HS2 to go with. Where would you go now?
Well, I think there are some benefits that need to be looked at. I think the triple lock is running to levels which is frankly unaffordable. There's some other benefits for example, the free TfL travel for the over 60s, which seems unsustainable. I think we do need to look again at the benefits system to ensure that it's properly encouraging work. HS2 is another one. I think there's a lot that the government could be looking at. Some of the woke projects, Arts Council, again, there's really a plentiful supply of waste and overspending on things that we simply cannot afford.
The government could counsel, squeeze down, save the money on. But could it also, when it comes to spend money, do it more efficiently? Because the process of getting a project agreed is enormously bureaucratic. I was very impressed. There's a government body that does the large infrastructure projects, and the IPA. And I discussed with them how much the restoration and renewal of Palace of Westminster would cost. And in 5 minutes, this chap said to me it would be between 10 and 20 billion pounds. We then spent a couple of £100 million on the professional work to come up with a figure. And they came up with a figure of £14 billion, which was pretty much in the middle of the range that had been suggested by somebody after a few minutes' cogitation. Don't we need to be swifter at working through things and then making things happen?
I think if a government decides that project is going to go ahead, it needs to, go on full steam. But I mean, at the same time, it needs to ensure that there is a business case, there is an estimate that is serious, that is not done politically to get approval for a project that is seen as necessary for some political motivation. So I think it's about being really, really honest at the start and not saying, this is only going to cost a figure that we want it to cost, not what is realistic. And then once that figure is properly established and a business case is proven to have economic benefits, it's about ensuring that a certain degree of competence and continuity is implied to completing the project in the short to medium term.
And I hope the Taxpayers Alliance will always ensure that the term taxpayers' money is used rather than government spending, or even worse, investment, which is a Gordon Brown word to pretend that spending isn't what it is. Thank you very much for coming on, and to the Taxpayers Alliance for all its work. Next, oh goodness, all the posh organisations, the great pillars of our establishment, Oxfam, the BBC and the CBI are mired in scandal. Do we get the institutions we deserve?
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. I continue to identify as Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is State of the Nation. You've been getting in touch with your male Moggs, though none of you seem very interested in wasting taxpayers' money, which I'm a bit surprised by. I thought I'd be bombarded with male Moggs on that. Instead, I've got more on the free press. Stuart, I'm a true believer in the free press. However, the MSM, mainstream media, in this country are far too powerful and full of left-leaning propaganda. They lie, mislead, misreport, and are very selective in what and how they report stories. Darren says the human race is unable to make the right decisions and choices, so super AI will do it for us. Take our DNA and even have the ability to bring us back from extinction. Super AI is dangerous only if it's used in the wrong way. But if we see digital currency, and if we've already part of it and already, then super AI is already active. So, the established UK powerhouses, the BBC and the CBI and indeed Oxfam, have come under fire for their failure correctly to deal with complaints and other issues. A report regarding the BBC's Executive Complaints Unit was submitted to the government, deeming it unfit for purpose, which is a terrible phrase, but never mind, it's clearly useless, because among 1.7 million complaints the BB received in total, only 25 complaints, which were regarding bias, were upheld in the last 5 years. And the effectiveness of the complaints unit is not surprisingly now under assessment. So we complain about the complaints units. That's absolutely brilliant, ain't it, the BBC? As the unit becomes a sinking ship, the CBI sort of arose from the ashes, though it may still be held below the waterline, as the scandalised lobby group maintained support of their members in a confidence vote following a series of sexual harassment allegations and other claims. I mean, the fact that it's got every policy wrong in decades. It opposed Margaret Thatcher, it was in favour of the exchange rate mechanism, it wanted the euro, it didn't like Brexit. Forget the fact that it got all its campaigning wrong. These are really serious sexual harassment allegations that have come out recently, and it led to organisations, including BT and Rolls-Royce, cancelling their membership. So, will our big institutions ever take the public's complaints seriously? And to add to this, the charity Oxfam has come under fire after its media team posted a video apparently depicting author J.K. Rowling and others in a villainous light. The charity belatedly took down the video and argued the image was referring to nobody in particular, which is so bogus. If you do something stupid, just apologise. The humbug is so tiresome, we all see through it. But despite an ex-volunteer claiming to have been hounded out of the organisation for defending the Harry Potter author, who it quite clearly is. The charity previously was caught up in sex abuse scandals, bullying complaints from employees and myriad other controversies over the years, yet it seems to be extolling the sort of moralistic bigotry it ought to be fighting. Why does anyone give any money to this particular charity? Well, let's examine this with my eminent panel of barrister and former Conservative MP, Jeremy Hayes, and the legendary broadcaster and journalist, Mike Crick.
The unkindest cut of all.
Michael.
Jake.
Indeed. I thought you'd get me back on that one. Michael, these organisations, I mean, come on, only 25 complaints of bias being upheld. You can't listen to the BBC for a day without noticing that there is bias, not always in the same direction, but that any organisation gets more than 25 things wrong.
First of all, I have to confess that I have actually had a complaint against me upheld by the editorial complaints unit when I was at the BBC. It was an absurd decision. I'd done a little profile of Lord Levy, you know, the Labour Party fundraiser, and in the profile I'd mentioned the fact he was Jewish, which of course he is, and he's very proud of the fact he's Jewish. It's a huge part of him, and that was regarded as regarded as against the rules. Anyway, on your wider point, yes, I mean 25 complaints about. Is it 25 complaints about bias? I think that you said
that's 1.7 million in total. Yeah. But of the ones about bias, which isn't the full 1.7 million, only 25 were upheld.
Well, one would expect it to be a lot more than it should be a lot more than that. There is, you know, a fair bit of bias in the BBC, as there is in many broadcasting institutions, although the most of it, more of it in this particular institution.
You're on for balance. You're on for balance. It's why I give you so long to talk.
I'm the balance against all these people, you and Farage and everybody else.
Because you're so good. Now, carry on.
No, seriously. I think it should be more than that, of course. But I think the BBC on the bias issue has got a lot better than it was, say, 10 years ago. I mean, even somebody like Mark Thompson has admitted, for instance, they got it wrong on, not examining the European Union, not scrutinising the affairs of the European Union as closely as they should have done. And I think a lot of people in the BBC now recognise that they didn't deal with the immigration issue in the way that 10 or 15 years ago, because they feared being accused of racism. I think a lot of those attitudes are changing, actually, within the BBC. I think Channel 4 News, where I worked 10 years ago, had a similar... In fact, in a way, I think Channel 4 News was worse, because there was an element within the programme 10 years ago where people felt it was a crusade to stop Brexit and to bring down the Conservative government. Now, none of that is right. None of that is right. But all institutions have their faults, and I suppose the bigger the institution, the harder it is to get rid of them.
Jerry, do you think the CBI should survive?
The CBI
Does it serve any useful
has
purpose?
Got to survive.
Why?
Because there has to be a representative body to represent enterprise and business.
But they don't represent enterprise. They represent big business, and big business is pretty good at lobbying for itself, isn't it?
No,
and the Chambers of Commerce has set up an organisation.
No, it's not. And in fact, the reason I'm wearing a bow tie, I've just come back from the memorial service of the great man,
very distinguished man,
Lord Young of Grafham. But let's just go back to the BBC. I think the BBC tries to get it right. Oh, hello. Dan has just crashed the show.
We might get Michael to come back, because I want to mention Oxfam.
The BBC, of course, is that the BBC is also regulated by Ofcom, so people can complain to Ofcom as well. Although personally, I think Ofcom is an incredibly weak, feeble, spineless institution that should have closed you lot down ages ago, and that's the 4th time I've said that in this studio. No, but seriously, I do believe that. But I don't think Ofcom is powerful enough and serious enough to get a grip on these issues the way that
let's come to Oxfam, which has been deeply offensive to J.K. Rowling, as far as one can tell. And because it's pious, because it's a charity, it seems to think it can get away with these things. The sex scandals were absolutely dreadful in the way it had behaved. Why is it that essentially left-wing institutions think they can get away with this?
Well, there are right-wing institutions that have their fair share of sex scandals. I mean, I wrote a book about your fellow presenter, Nigel Farage. I thought, UKIP was full of sex scandals. I mean, they never got out, but there was...
every party is full of
it's not a
sex scandal. Can we go back to the BBC? Because Dan came in and
distracted you, yes.
But the fact is, the left say the BBC is Tory, it's right-wing. The right say it's left. So can't we just say they've probably got it right? By and large, when the BBC get it wrong, they get it horribly wrong. But they try to get it right. However...
like the little girl with the pretty curl right in the middle of her forehead. When she is good, she is very, very good. But when she is bad, she is horrid. But on that happy note, that is all from up next. It's the great Professor Daniel Wootton with a must-watch show on His Royal Highness, the Duke of Sussex.
I know, but I'm so sorry, because I did try and sneak in quietly, and with the magic of TV, you wouldn't have seen me, but Jerry Hayes blew the little TV secret that I was sneaking in quietly. But yes, we have a special edition of the show tonight, Jacob. We're actually reenacting Prince Harry's evidence in court today. You're going to see those fascinating exchanges between him and the Mirror's Casey, plus incredible reaction from Lady Colin Campbell, Megyn Kelly, Tom Bower and Angela Levin.
Well, I think that's going to be an absolutely star show. It's going to be really exciting to watch, and the KC is going to be a national figure in the next few days. Really exciting programme for you all. That's coming up after the weather. I'm sure the sun is shining in Somerset. It always does. I will be back on the morrow at 8 o'clock. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this has been State of the Nation.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here with the GB News forecast from the Met Office. Cloudy for many during the next 24 hours. It will be clearest in the west, and later through the day on Wednesday the cloud will break up more widely. But for the time being, it's the same old weather pattern we've had for some weeks now. High pressure to the north of the UK, this cool and cloudy easterly airflow bringing suppressed temperatures in from the North Sea. And through Monday night, as well as through much of Tuesday, we've seen this persistent low cloud spread across much of central and eastern UK, and that creeps a bit further westwards during the early hours of Wednesday. But we keep the clear skies for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, North West England, West Wales, and here a few mist patches likely with temperatures into the single figures. A bit of a chill in the air first thing, but it's actually the sun will soon warm things up. Elsewhere, a grey start, a lot of cloud again affecting East Wales, the Midlands, eastern parts of England, central and northern Scotland. But a better chance, I think, through Wednesday of that cloud retreating back to the immediate North Sea coast, where it stays on the cool side, 11 to 14 Celsius on the coast. Warm sunshine replaces the cloud elsewhere, with low 20s likely in some of the warmer spots, South Wales, central southern England, for example. Then into Wednesday evening, the cloud